Hello everyone, welcome to BookBeat. This is going to be a series of book reviews of mainly crime fiction. We're going to look at the various crime novels of famous writers like Elmore Leonard, Robert B. Parker Spencer, and also I'm going to do something a little bit different, less famous. We're going to look at the Jess Williams Western series. He's a bounty hunter. And then we'll also get into two other series, one called Storm Warrior and another one called Hunt, U.S. Marshal. Most of these are very long series, anywhere from 30 to 80 books in the entire series, and we're going to go over every damn one of them and have a great time doing it. So today we're going to start with Jess Williams, and we're going to look at the first novel in the series, the first story. It's called The Reckoning. But there's a lot of background information that I need to share with you about this series and who Jess Williams was. The book series is written by a man named Robert J. Thomas. He used to be a politician in Indianapolis, retired, and started writing these Jess Williams stories. He started with a trilogy, of which The Reckoning is the first. But believe it or not, he's now up to his 89th book. And I have read all of them. I love them. And obviously that's why I'm going to commit so much time to going over each and every story. For each story, hopefully I'll be able to, I will be following this format. I'm going to tell you who's in the book, where the story takes place. Jess moves around a lot, so probably be a few different places each time. Why things happen in the story, so a little bit of background. What actually takes place in the story. Obviously, I can't tell you all the details, but just to whet your appetite. What surprises come up in the story? What surprised me in the story? What kinds of things are repeated here in the story? It is a series, and we should expect things to repeat themselves. And in fact, isn't that why we love series? Because things do repeat themselves. They're familiar. We know what's coming, but we like it. And then finally, each time, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite lines from each of the stories and a body count. How many people does Jess Williams kill in each story? I'm going to tell you how many he killed and what the running total is. So please enjoy that, if I can use the word enjoy, but I think you'll understand why I use the word enjoy after I tell you more about Jess. So, who was Jess Williams? Yeah, who was he? Well, actually, the story takes place in and around, or I should say it starts around 1876. So that's what, 150 years ago? Soon after the Revolutionary War. And when we join Jess, He's a young 14-year-old boy. He's got a mother, a father, a little sister, and they have a farm. And yeah, we learn a little bit about the family, how strict the parents are, what a pain in the ass his sister is, and yeah, in a sense, what a good boy Jess is. He's serious and always does his best to please his parents. And like other young boys his age, he's also interested in guns and learning how to shoot a gun. He asks his father to teach him. His father's not really, well, the mother is actually not happy about that, but the father knows that in those days we're in Kansas, out in the middle of nowhere, pretty rough area in those days. That yeah, Jess needed to learn how to take care of himself. So, what happens? Jess is on his way into town one day when he meets three, yeah, from the beginning we know these are bad guys. We find out later that they have been kind of kicked out of town by the sheriff, and they pass Jess, they stop him, they threaten him a little bit. They leave, Jess leaves, and he goes into town, does what he needs to do, chats with the sheriff for a few minutes about the bad guys, and is just very, very worried about his own family because he knows that those three guys were going to be passing his farm. So he hurries home, back to the farm, and gets there and finds that his family has been killed. All three of them have been butchered, murdered, and it's bloody and just a total shock. It's described pretty graphically, so if you have a weak stomach, you might even want to skip that part. But yeah. So the sheriff comes along. He's worried also and finds Jess sitting on the front stoop in shock. The sheriff goes out, finds Jess's father shot in the back in the field. He comes back. He finds Jess's mother murdered and raped, and he finds even Jess's little 7-year-old sister murdered and raped. Well, this is the start of the series, and this is what makes Jess who he is and who he becomes. It's after this then that Jess decides to devote his life to hunting down these three bad men who killed his family and getting revenge. He is absolutely sure that he's going to find them and he's going to kill them. But he's not ready, is he? He's only a 14-year-old boy. And so he spends the next 2 years basically taking care of the farm and learning how to shoot. Before his father had been murdered, he had been teaching Jess with a kind of a wooden pistol, but Jess now starts to practice for real with his father's real gun, a Colt 45, a 6-shooter. And one day, something very, very surprising happens. And this is where in the story we have a kind of a time slip moment, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But one day in the barn, Jess suddenly finds a unique, totally unique pistol and holster. It's not like any gun he's ever seen in his life. The holster is unique, and Jess puts it on and notices how easy it is to use this gun, how quickly he can draw this gun. And so from that day on, not only does Jess practice with his father's Colt, but he also practices with this gun too. And he's fast. He's good. No one knows it yet, but he's destined to become the fastest gun in the West. And it all starts here when he's just 14, 15, and then 16 years old. So, just turned 16, and it's time. He's got shotguns, he's got knives, he's got his pistols, he's loaded to the teeth, and he has some information about where these three bad men might be in a small town in southern Texas. And so that's where Jess is going to head. But when he gets to town that day, remember, he still hasn't killed anyone. When he gets to town that day, something has happened. The sheriff has been killed by a local kind of a big rancher's son who's kind of a troublemaker, a hothead. He's gone ahead and shot the sheriff, and Jess can't believe it and loses his temper, gets really angry, goes to the saloon where this guy's hanging out and challenges him to a draw. And this bad guy, the rich kid son, the son of the rich rancher, can't believe that this little snot-nosed 16-year-old kid actually thinks he's going to beat him. They go out onto the street and boom, 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 he's dead. Jess has outdrawn him, wasn't even close, and this guy is dead. This is going to come back later in other books, book number 2, book number 3, Brother's Keeper, Sins of the Father, where the father of this guy that Jess has killed, the first guy he kills, the first of many, decides that he wants to revenge his son's death, and later will try to have Jess killed. But more on that in future book reviews. Okay, so Jess leaves town and heads to Texas. Takes him, quite a few days to get there, and he's on the road on his horse, and he camps out, and he's alone he's traveling for the first time in his life. So, the rest of the story is about Jess hunting down these three guys, Jess helping other people along the way that need help, Jess making friends, and basically we get to learn a lot about this young man, who he is, and what he is. Okay, let's talk about some of the repeats. Well, what do I mean by repeats? Things that happen from story to story, again and again. People who we meet again, not every time, but these are main characters in the story. People that are close to Jess. Who do we have here in town? We have Jim and Sarah Smith. They own the general store, and they're like second family to Jess. We've got Tony at the blacksmith stable livery. We've got Andy, who runs the saloon. Sheriff Diggs, I mentioned before, who has been killed. Mr. Jameson, the local banker. Gray, and then later Sharps, Jess's horses. We meet later another bounty hunter, and who then later becomes a sheriff, a U.S. Marshal named Frank Reedy. He comes into play quite often in this series of 89 Jess Williams books. And, well, the gun and how fast Jess is the biggest repeat in all of these stories. And Jess's desire to basically go after the bad guys and kill all the bad guys. But the reason he can do it, yeah, he's fast, but this gun makes him super fast. And if you read reviews on Amazon, you'll see a few people kind of laugh at this, but to me, I think it's a kind of a stroke of genius. So why is Jess so good? Well, maybe we can call it, divine intervention. And when you hear the time slip story and how Jess finding that gun is kind of connected to people in 2002, fast draw champions and other interesting things, it kind of makes sense, and it tells us why Jess is so good, and it makes me think, yeah, of course Jess can't be beaten. God's on his side. Yeah, so what is Jess's character? What do we know about him? What comes up book after book after book? So, in a sense, maybe we can say Jess is pure. He has a deep, deep rage and hatred for people like the bad guys who killed his family. And in that day and age, those kinds of bad guys are all over the place. They have no respect for life. And Jess decides, step by step, to become what they call a bounty hunter. And as a bounty hunter, he only goes after the worst of the worst. He doesn't waste time on cattle rustlers or bank robbers who are only wanted. No, he goes after those that are wanted, dead or alive. And Jess's approach to his job is to bring them in dead. They're evil people. They deserve to die, and it makes his job easier and safer. If they're dead, he doesn't have to worry about them escaping. He doesn't have to worry about them being released by a judge. So that's what happens. Okay, what else comes up again and again in the Jess Williams series? Well, as he goes about his business, his reputation grows. Jess becomes known as the fastest gun in the West. And so there are a bunch of, I guess we could call them professional gunslingers, who's sometimes they're gamblers, but basically gunslingers. who go around challenging other gunslingers to fights. And these come up, I don't know how many times, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times per story. And as the stories go along, it gets worse and worse because Jess's reputation grows more and more people are out to get him. So this comes up quite often. Some other things that come up quite often, other typical bad guys, guys who are wanted for bank robberies, and during the robberies have killed. We've got evil guys who kill people for the pure pleasure of it. They rape, they kill, and we've also got the power-hungry rancher who isn't satisfied with a small ranch. He wants a big ranch. He wants to crowd out his competitors, and so will go to any length to get them. Yeah, those kind of people come up again and again and again too in this series of what I mentioned. We're now up to 89 books. I'm speaking to you at kind of near the end of December 2019. I assume we're going to have a lot more books to come. So that's kind of the background of who Jess Williams is, and this first story, The Reckoning. Jess's family is killed, as I said, and basically Jess goes out to revenge his family and becomes a bounty hunter as a profession. Okay, before we leave, let me just share with you a few of my favorite lines in The Reckoning. Okay, let me see. Sorry, there's so many in this book. Okay, here's a line from the book that'll tell you kind of Jess's show you what Jess's philosophy is about why he doesn't think it's bad to be a bounty hunter and killer of bad men. It says, there were bad men and there were really bad men. These were men who would kill without remorse or rob people of their life's work and sleep like a baby with no regret for their actions. However, Blake Taggart didn't belong to that class of men. He was in a class all by himself. He was just plain evil to the bone. If ever God made mistakes, Blake Taggart was surely one of them. There was absolutely nothing good about Taggart. He had killed his first man when he was just 12. That man was his father. His father was a mean, ornery cuss who beat Blake's mother. And whenever he felt like it, he'd beat on Blake. One night, he took a bottle and broke it over Blake's head. It cut Blake's head so bad that the blood just kept running in his eyes, and he could hardly see. Blake was used to the violence, but for some reason, something snapped inside him that night. Maybe the knock on his head did something to change him, or maybe he was just a bad seed, and he had finally had all he could take from his father. Blake went over to the fireplace and took down the Winchester rifle that his father always kept there and shot his father 4 times. When his mother screamed at him, he shot her 3 times. He saddled up the best horse, took all the money his parents had stashed in the house, and never looked back. Truth be known, no one ever figured out Blake was the one who killed his parents. Everyone thought Blake had been kidnapped and killed or had run off after finding his parents murdered. Yeah, so this guy, Blake Taggart, is one of the men that, killed Jess's family. So you can see, this is the type of person that Jess was going after. Okay, little something about Jess. Oh, by the way, I should mention that one of the surprises in this series is there's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of really funny scenes, funny conversations, and Jess is just such a sweet, nice person. We really love this young man who, although he's violent and kills all these bad people, he's really at heart a very pure person that everyone learns to love, and he really takes care of his friends. He's generous. He's always helping people in trouble, and it's one of the reasons we love the series. Well, okay, let me read one more. Sometimes when one was asleep, a sound out of the ordinary can wake a person up, even when you never really consciously heard the sound. That's what the squeak outside Jess's door was like. Jess didn't consciously hear it, but his subconscious did, and his brain began giving out signals to let him know that something was awry. It didn't wake him, it just put him on the edge of awake. Now, when the door did that little shaky thing, when Beard finally got the nerve to push it open, well, that was another thing. Jess was always prepared for an ambush. When he slept with his shotgun by his bed within easy reach, and his pistol was right next to his right hip. He slept on his back, and he always moved the bed so that he had a clear view of the door when he opened his eyes. Those things, along with the squeaky floor and the shaky door, were what spelled bad news for Hank Beard, although Hank didn't realize it yet. Beard pushed the door and noticed that it was stuck a little at the top. He had already made the decision to open the door, and even though his brain was telling his body he should stop, his body weight was already in motion. It was one of those things that you just can't stop in time, even though you know you should. Beard threw open the door and raised his shotgun to put a load of buckshot into Jess, but things didn't quite go the way he planned. Jess was awake and had his pistol trained on the door before it was open enough to see who was coming in. The next thing Jess's eyes saw in the dim light was a shotgun barrel. That was all he needed to know. Jess's first shot was right through that flimsy door just as it flew open, and it hit Beard in his left side, knocking him off balance. By then the door was fully open and Beard was totally exposed. Jess's second shot hit him in his right shoulder, which caused him to drop the shotgun as he fell against the wall a second time, this time falling on his ass. By now, Jess was standing up and hovering over Beard, trying to see in the dim light. Well, I have to give you the body count. Says 12 there, but actually it's 18 in this story, starting with the guy who took out the sheriff in Black Creek, Kansas, where Jess Williams lived. and then along with the 3 men who killed his family, and then other people along the way. In the reckoning, the body count is actually 18, and I'll keep you up to date on that, each and every book. Yeah, so today only will be this long. Others will not be as long. I needed to tell you a lot about, give you the background on who Jess was, and I hope you'll stay with me, be with me for this series on Jess Williams. Thanks a lot, guys.